Hey guys, this is an answer to a video question online, and I disagreed with a few points, and I wanted to just give a video answer instead of typing. Especially sometimes when you disagree on the internet with typing, you have to really phrase things carefully, and you want to be respectful to the other person and kind, because in the world of shaving, especially, there are just not really any wrong answers. If it makes you happy, if you enjoy doing it, then just keep doing it, you know. And so I wanted to respond a little bit to and talk about a couple of issues about face lathering and um, versus bowl lathering. It's not going to be a complete thing at all. But this is mainly for Alessandro de Pascalis, and I apologize if I have messed up your name. Spark and Arc also joined in on that particular thread, and this is with my shave with the Gillette 40s style Persona Israeli red blade at 12 uses with the Mammoth Tusk Stones soap that was recently posted. And Alessandro says, hi, why don't you face lather sometime? Very satisfying and way more protective. Hi from Italy. Well, hi from the United States. I think it's awesome. And I've mentioned this before, that I've got viewers from all over the world and Italy as well. I mean, come on, that's like, I think that's what many consider the home of this wet shaving hobby that we have. And so I think that's really cool. So hi, thank you so much for chiming in and asking questions and watching the channel. And I always love discussion. And while we may disagree on a few points, again, if your way makes you happy, then that's just awesome. So Alessandro says, why don't you face lather sometime? Well, I have. I've face lathered a good bit, but not nearly as much as I bowl lather. And that's because I just like bowl lathering so much better. And we'll go into that a little bit more. But I do have some face lathers. I wish I would have remembered to create a playlist for my face lathers. Since they are really the exception, that might have been a cool thing. I have done some experimentation with the habit that people have now of overloading the brush, loading for a really long time on the soap so that you hopefully have enough soap to last till the end of the shave. And I did not like that at all, because the lather is just too concentrated. It doesn't meet my needs. It's too pasty and not as slick, not as protective enough. And so I have tried that to just see. Now, I am not an authority on face lathering, because but I've tried it enough to where I know that I like bowl lathering better. However, I'm not going to say conclusively that one way is better than the other. I'm not going to diss face lathering too much, because I think you can't do that unless you have really worked at it to get good at it. Okay, there's plenty of guys who say bowl lathering sucks when they haven't done it right, and it's because they haven't practiced, and they haven't either they didn't luck into it with the right talent and the right combination of things, in which case they would need to put some time in and work at it to get good results. And so until you do that, you don't really have an accurate basis of comparison. And so that's why my views about face lathering are loosely held in that respect. And so I'm not going to come down hard on face lathering. Even if I was an expert, I wouldn't, just because, like I said, you do you. All right. So I have done some face lathers. They are out there. I wish I could find a way I might find a way to index them somehow. Alessandro says face lathering is very satisfying and way more protective. It's not satisfying for me. I like my lathers very wet and elastic and lubricated to give me the slickness and protection that I want. If I have a lather that's drier than the way I usually like it, I often find I get more irritation. It doesn't protect me as well. I get more of a scrapey feeling and then so the face lathering, or the dry lather is not good, not my preference, and so it's not satisfying. And one of the reasons it's not to me is that as I'm working, and Spark and Arc, I think he alluded to this, as I'm working my face, and I probably said this on this very video, the Stones video we're talking about, as I'm working and with face lathering, you come to your face with concentrate, kind of on purpose, and that's okay. But then you start adding water to your brush, like Michael Friedberg will dribble water onto the brush tips, or you start with more water in your brush so you don't have to add quite as much during the shave, but you start with kind of some concentrate and you work it on your face. And I find that the elasticity that I like in my lather, by the time I add enough water to it to where it gets really good, that is what flies off of my face as I'm moving my brush. That's what drips down on my shirt. What's left is what's too pasty, and what flies off, what comes off of me, is what I really want to use. And so it's very frustrating for me. I did have one time, I was talking with an old school guy, and he was saying, don't take that overload approach. Think about it as, start off with some water in your brush. Don't shake it all out like I usually do. Start out with some water in your brush and load kind of a normal amount. Like, think of the water that's in your brush and then the soap that you're going to load on the tips, and try to get that ratio right just for what your one brush can hold, instead of trying to make the lather last 3 passes. Get it, just focus on what would make one brush. So that's less loading, that's not overloading, that sort of thing. And that actually was a much better approach. And if I did face lather, I would probably go that route. And that made for a much more pleasant lather, because after all, if you start out overloaded, then you're starting off even more dry. You're starting off really dry, and it needs a lot of water. And so it takes a while to get all that water into the lather. And so that's another way. You can overload. Then you can kind of think about it just what I just described as, let's get enough stuff to where this one brush has just the right amount of lather for that one instance of that one brush. And so those are a couple of ways to face lather. But kind of lost my train of thought there, so I'm sorry. But I find that bowl lathering, with bowl lathering, I can just mix up the whole thing, and then I have the right ratio. The bowl keeps that nice loose lather, that creamy, silky, marshmallow creamy lather that's really elastic. If you've watched my videos, you've seen me pull the brush up and had the lather just melt down into the bowl. That's where I like my lather, with a good soap. And so it's hard to get that. It's frustrating to try to get that when face lathering. So for me, face lathering is definitely not satisfying. More protective, I disagree with that as well, Alessandro. I'm afraid, in my experience, it's less protective, because I can't get that slickness that I want. I have to settle when I'm face lathering, usually, with a more dry lather. And the drier is less protective. It's not as slick. Slickness equals protection, in my opinion, in my experience. As well as the fact that when you've got concentrate on your face, when you've got a pasty lather, when you've got a thick, dense lather on your face, that's more soap coming in contact with your face, a higher concentration of soap. And when you do that, then you can get irritation, especially people with sensitivity issues. When you throw in a bunch of water in there with a nice wet lather, you'll have a lot less sensitivity issues. At least that's the theory I've got going in my head, and it does make sense. If your lather's more diluted with water, then that's less soap that's going to irritate your face. And so if you have concentrate on your face, then that can, number one, it's drier, and so it's not as slick. It doesn't hydrate the hairs as well. It can also irritate just the surface of your skin, never mind the hairs. And so if it irritates the surface of your skin, it's not protecting you, and you can walk away with a little irritation or itching. Oh man, a couple times I know I have run a lather a little too dry, like with Williams and a few other soaps, and it wasn't a fault of the soap. And I hear people walk away from Williams saying, that's itchy, or it was way too dry. Well, they didn't add enough water to it. I had an itchy face one time with Williams, and it was because I didn't have enough water. I had not added enough water. And so to me, it's a face lathering. I'm not saying that face lathering is not as protective. Alessandro claims it is way more protective. But I'm saying that typically a face latherer will create a lather that's less hydrated, and that is less protective. Now, if you're face lathering and you manage to get to a really nice elastic, wet, well hydrated lather, then that's going to be just as protective as that same nice wet lather that I can create in a bowl. And so it's easy for me to create. Let's change the words around and say kind of the same thing. It's easier for me to create a more protective lather in the bowl than it is on the face. It's a big chore on the face with a bunch of lather flying around, and very frustrating for me to get to that protective lather. That's another way. And then face lathering makes it easier for new guys to settle for a dry, unprotected lather than to keep going and pushing for a more wet lather. So there's that. And then Spark and Art jumps in and says, hi, Alessandro, why do you think face lathering is more protective? That's kind of what I was alluding to as well. I think it's faster, Spark says, but I don't see how it's more protective. I would agree with Spark in this case. And face lathering can be faster in my experience, but not by a lot for me, in my experience as well. And then Spark continues on, and if you tend to mix lather on the wet side, it is challenging to keep it from flying about. Exactly what I was talking about. Hello from Maryland in the USA. That's awesome. We've got Maryland and North Carolina and Italy all talking together about this hobby that we like. I think that's great. And so then Alessandro replies to Spark and says, I don't think there are any time advantages. So that's very interesting. Most face latherers that I have read from and watched videos on do kind of claim time savings as one of the big benefits to face lathering. So that's interesting that Alessandro doesn't. Alessandro continues, rather, I do it faster in the bowl. Interesting. Which is, neither here nor there. Good for him. It's definitely more protective, he says, about face lathering because, number one, the lather doesn't incorporate air, which happens in the bowl. Number two, the lather sticks to your skin like putty. Check out some face lathering videos on Mauro di Lernia Italian channel and let me know what you think. Bye. Well, I disagree on most of the points of what he said, carefully and respectfully. He claims that it's more protective. Face lathering is more protective, he says, because the lather doesn't incorporate air, which he claims happens with the bowl. And I would disagree with that. With the bowl or with your face, you're moving your brush over a surface. And if it's the bowl, then it's a shape like this, and your bristles are just moving. And if it's your face, it's a shape like this, and your bristles are moving the same way they might move in the corner of the bowl. They move in that hump on your face, whatever is pointed, whatever concave surface is, a convex surface is near your brush. That's like a lump, and so I totally disagree about the incorporating air. And I've done this test. I have that 3D bowl that is printed, and it has ridges in it and a little bump in the middle. And I like it because it agitates the lather, but I don't like it because the reason I like it is not because it adds air. And I've done this test before. I have taken that same bowl with all of its contours, used it for a soap, and I got this kind of a light bubbliness in a particular soap. And I said, I wonder if I'm introducing more air. So I went and I got one of my other bowls, just a Dollar Tree soup bowl that has no contours. It's smooth glazed ceramic, just a normal soup bowl. And that lather whipped up had the same little micro bubbles in it. And so that just happens. And so I don't believe that a bowl incorporates air more than face lathering does. I believe they're pretty much the same. I think what's probably happening and why Alessandro probably thinks it incorporates more air is because he's overloading with his face. And so it's thicker on his face. That would be my guess. And so it's not that it's introducing less air, it's just that he's got a higher density of soap in his soap to water ratio. Let's see. His second point was face lathering is more protective because the lather sticks to your skin like putty. Again, if it's sticking to your skin like putty, I don't believe it's because there's not air in there. I believe it's because it's a very concentrated lather that needs a lot more water. And that is the kind of lather that, to me, I get this scrapey, irritating feeling most of the time. And I avoid that like the plague. And so I think that's just an overloading, highly dry, relatively speaking, lather. And so if it sticks to you like putty, that is my guess. And so that, to me, that is definitely not more protective. That is more irritating and harder to shave with. Now, I will also have to check out the lathering videos of Mauro de Lernia as well, his Italian channel. We'll see. Now, if Alessandro likes him, then odds are he's a face latherer who probably uses a very dry lather. And to be honest, most of the shavers out there on YouTube use a lot drier lather than I do. And so if you like that is just fine. Not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just it's just not my preference. If you like a dry lather, at least more dry than I do, then that is just fine. Just fine. If that works for you, then that's just fine. Very good. Spark answers again by saying, interesting. I face lather 99% of the time, says Spark. I will have to bowl lather for a while and see if I notice a difference. I'll definitely check out that channel. Very kind of Spark to respond in that way. And so I love the communication we have. Very few arguments on my channel in the comments, and I'm really glad about that. I'm glad that we can all disagree and do it respectfully if we do happen to disagree. And if you want some more details about face lathering versus bowl lathering, I have recorded some of my observations on sugardaddy.com. And there is, if you look on the left, there should be a link there for face versus bowl lathering or bowl versus face lathering. And it's got a list of items that differences that I'm able to see. Now, then you can take your own values and then apply that because maybe face lathering is better for you. For me, it's bowl lathering all the way. So I definitely consider face lathering. I consider face lathering more satisfying, more meditative, more relaxing. I get plenty of feel on my brush because I do work my face quite a bit. And it's also very conservative with soap. It conserves soap much better than face lathering compared to those guys who overload. They often have measured the soap that they use per shave to be about 1.5 grams, 1.5 to 2.5 grams of soap per shave. And I'm using about 0.5 gram of soap per shave. And I'm getting probably more lathers more passes and more consistent passes than they are. I'm getting 4 or 5 consistent, elastic, wonderful, luxurious, creamy passes where theirs have a rapid decline after that first pass because you have less lather in your brush. all that concentrate kind of gets rinsed down the drain that first time, the first pass. And so to me, in pretty much all respects, time is the only thing. I think between 1 and 3 minutes, 1 and 4 minutes, depending, face lathering was a little bit faster sometimes. And I bet I could probably improve on that, and if I wanted to really face lather a lot and get a little bit better with that. And that's definitely not, I'm not going to speak authoritatively on that because, again, I'm not an expert face latherer. I'm more authoritative when it comes to bowl lathering. I've just done it so much, I feel like I can speak with some weight on that. Very good. So, Alessandro, thank you so much for watching my channel, and I will definitely check out Mauro's videos as well as maybe Spark will. And I really appreciate you watching, and I respectfully disagree about the satisfying and protective nature of face lathering, but I also agree that if you enjoy it and you find it more protective and you find it more satisfying, then go for it. That's what you need to do. Thanks so much. This is Sugar Daddy Shaves, and I didn't know that I would talk about it this long, but we in the shaving world, this is the kind of thing we discuss endlessly, right? On forums and board posts and things like that. There we go. All right, this is Sugar Daddy Shaves, and you guys take care. Bye.